All right, so lesson 5 covers operations using scientific notation. The 4 main operations that we're going to be working with is addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. For the most part, when people are asked about the different operations, everybody always says that division is the most challenging one. Okay? Usually the order is division as hardest, then you have multiplication, then you have subtraction, and lastly you have addition. Everybody thinks that that's the easiest one. Now, when you're dealing with scientific notation, the most challenging part is actually adding and subtracting, because there's some changes that we need to do. That's why we're going to start with the easiest part, which is dividing and multiplying, and then we're going to jump into addition and subtraction. All right, so let's start with something that is a little bit familiar. We're going to start with dividing numbers in scientific notation. So we're going to be working with 4 times 10 to the 9th power divided by 2 times 10 to the 8th power. The first thing that we're going to do is change this into a fraction form. So we're going to make it look like 4 times 10 to the 9th power over 2 times 10 to the 8th power. So keep in mind, the first thing we did is write it into a fraction form. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to draw a vertical line through the multiplication sign. So I want to be drawing a line, and that's going to indicate the left and the right side, and we're just going to keep the multiplication sign right there. After we have that, we're going to be dealing with this from one side and then from the other. So the third step is going to be divide the left side okay, so that means I'm only going to be paying attention to the 4 and the 2. So 4 divided by 2 is going to be equal to 2. So I'm just going to write 2. And our fourth step is going to be use properties of exponent to simplify. That means right here we have 10 to the 9th power, and right here we have 10 to the 8th power. Using the properties from lesson 1, that means that we're going to be dealing with exponents and we're going to keep the same base. I'm going to keep the same base of 10, but whenever you're dividing the exponents, you actually need to subtract them. So 9 minus 8 will give you 1, and that will be your answer. 2 times 10 to the 1st power. That is already in scientific notation, so let's leave it like that. And that is all you need to know to divide numbers in scientific notation. For this problem, we're going to be using the same numbers. So I'm going to write 4 times 10 to the 9th and we're going to have times 2 times 10 to the 8th. We know that multiplication is just the inverse of division, so the operations are very closely related. So we're going to do a similar process, and it's going to be as easy to multiply. So going back to 6th and 7th grade when you learn the properties of multiplication, so you're able to remove the parentheses because of the associative property. So we're going to rewrite this as 4 times 10 to the 9th times 2 times 10 to the 8th. Now, the associative property allows me to remove the parentheses so I can group them in a different manner. In this case, before we start grouping, we actually need to move things around. So what we're going to do is put the like terms together. We have an integer, a number by itself right here. But the one that is next to it is 10 to the 9th power. So that is an expression with an exponent. Then we have a 2, which is another integer, and then we have another base and an exponent. So we can actually group the 2 and the 4, and we're going to put it together. So we're going to write it as 4 times 2 times 10 to the 9th power times 10 to the 8th power. And again, the only thing we're doing right here is changing the order. The 4 stayed the same. Now the 2 came from this side. The 10 came from this side. 10 to the 9th, and then the 10 to the 8th stay the same. The next thing that we need to do is multiply liked terms. That means that I'm going to multiply the 4 and the 2, and that's going to give me 8. And then we're going to use, once again, the properties of integer exponents. So I'm going to keep the base. When we multiply these two, you need to add the exponent. So you're going to add the 9 and the 8, and 9 plus 8 is going to give you 17, and that is your answer. Again, so our fourth step is use properties of exponents, and that's how we got the 17. Now let's go into the more challenging one. So to add numbers in scientific notation, we're going to be using, again, the same numbers, and I'm going to write them as 4 times 10 to the 9th power plus 2 times 10 to the 8th power. Now, for this one, things get a little bit trickier. So let's make sure that we're writing every single step as we go. Even though we have parentheses right now, we can actually remove the middle ones. You know that the order of operation keeps multiplication before addition. So by removing the 2 inside parentheses, this one and this one, nothing will change. So let's do that. So remove, the first part will be remove parentheses. So remove the parentheses in between. So I'm going to rewrite this as 4 times 10 to the 9th plus 2 times 10 to the 8th. Now, you need to make sure the two bases have the same exponent. So we have the base of 10 right here with an exponent of 9, and then we have 10 to the 8th. We do not have the same exponent, so what we need to do is make sure that we get the right exponent. You can do it either way. You can make the 9 into an 8, or you can also do a trick to make the 8 into a 9. But I find it a little bit easier to make the 9 into an 8 because you guys are more familiar with breaking down numbers like that. So I'm going to change this 9 into a component of 8. To be able to do that, keep in mind that whenever you have 10 to the 9th power, you have 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, a total of 9 times. So I'm going to break it up, and I'm going to write it as 4 times 10 to the 1st power times 10 to the 8th power plus 2 times 10 to the 8th power. If you use the properties of exponents, in this case 10 to the 1st times 10 to the 8th, you will need to add the exponents, which will give you 9. So that's where the 8 and the 1 came from. They need to add up to 9. And the only reason that we choose 1 and 8 is because on this side we already have an 8. So I'm going to multiply the 4 times the 10, and that's going to give you 40 times 10 to the 8th plus 2 times 10 to the 8th. So our third step was to break the larger exponent. I'm just going to put EXP, the exponent. Okay? And then the fourth thing was to multiply four times 10 to the 1st. Okay, that's where we got the 40 from. Now going back to the properties that again you learn in 6th and 7th grade, you're going to use the inverse of the distributive property. The distributive property is when you have a factor on the outside and you're going to be multiplying it to every single term inside. Now, instead of doing that, we're going to be using something that they have inside and we're going to take it outside. So we're going to use factoring. And we're going to factor 10 to the 8th. If I factor 10 to the 8th and I want to take it out, that means that I'm going to grab it from here and put it outside. From here, take it outside. Okay, so I want to rewrite this as 40 times 2 times 10 to the 8th. Usually whenever you're factoring or whenever you're distributing your factors on the other side, but it makes no difference. If you were to multiply this times the inside number, you will get 40 times 10 to the 8th. If you multiply 10 to the 8th times 2, you will get the same expression right here. It doesn't change. You can test it out. And lastly, you're going to add the numbers inside the parentheses. So you have 42 times 10 to the 8th. That is not in scientific notation, so we're going to fix that. So our sixth step was to add the numbers inside the parentheses. So add the numbers remaining and 7 will be change to scientific notation, SN. Okay. Our decimal point in this case is right here, so we need to move it between the 4 and the 2. So to do that, we're going to actually write this as 4.2 times 10 to the first times 10 to the 8th, and that's going to give you 4.2 times 10 to the 9th, and that will be your answer. So I'm going to box it right here. That is your answer. For subtracting numbers, once again, we're going to use exactly the same numbers that we did before. So we're going to do 4 times 10 to the 9th power minus 2 times 10 to the 8th. Keep in mind that most of the time you're going to have them between parentheses, but you already know how to get rid of it. So in this case, we're going to start by skipping a couple steps. So our first step is going to make sure the exponents are the same. In this case, once again, we have two different exponents. I am going to teach you how to make the small exponent become the large exponent. So, to do that, I'm going to rewrite the left side because that's not going to change. Okay. Now, you need to keep in mind that the decimal point is right here between the 2 and the multiplication sign. Now, we need to move that decimal point one time this way. If we move it one time this way, then we're going to be left with 0.2 times 10. If you multiply 0.2 times 10, you get 2. okay, to the first power times 10 to the 8th power. Okay, again, we're going with moving the small exponent into the large exponent. One of the reasons I personally don't prefer this is that you're going to be dealing with decimal points. And whenever you're dealing with decimal points, more people are more likely to make mistakes. So I prefer doing the larger number into a smaller. Okay. After we have this, the next thing that we're going to do is combine the exponents. So we're going to combine the exponents. That means that I'm going to be adding the 1 to the 8, and that gives you 4 times 10 to the 9th minus 0.2 times 10 to the 9th. After we have that, we're going to factor ten to the 9th. Okay, so I want to add the parentheses right here, and that means that we're going to be grabbing the 10 to the 9th from here and taking it out. We're going to be grabbing the 10 to the 9th from here and taking it out. So we're going to get 4 minus 0.2 times 10 to the 9th. Solve for minus 0.2. So you need to solve whatever is inside the parentheses. After you have that, this is something that you can do in your head. If you don't feel comfortable, make sure that you show all your work. 3.8 times 10 to the 9th. Now, in this case, it's already in scientific notation, so there's nothing to do. Sometimes you will get numbers that are already in scientific notation, sometimes you won't. So if they're not in scientific notation, you need to put it in scientific notation.